So then, we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Israel, from the prophets of Yahweh, indicating the time of the end, so then the people living in this time would understand the closing of this age. As we understand, Yahweh also promised He would include the Gentiles, because He is so great, He is so mighty, He is very understanding, and He decided then at the end of times also the enlightenment of the Gentiles, so they could then observe from afar, from a Gentile perspective, how great Yahweh is. So then we Gentiles became very aware of the holy instructions, and from afar we can observe the mighty hand of Yahweh bringing His people, the set apart, out of Egypt with a mighty hand and signs and wonders, then through the Red Sea, and they were parked near the mountain. Then Moshe the prophet went up to the mountain, received the holy laws, and they started then the first service. As Gentiles, we can understand from the outside the intricacies of the holy services. So then later when the Messiah came, he then explained what those actions were. The Messiah came to complete then the spring feast. That's when we then understand what Shaliach Shaul was speaking of, shadow prophetic of the events related with the renewed covenant, where then the Gentiles would be included not as set apart at first, but as then people being shepherded by the set apart. The Messiah, however, told them, go around the world and form holy cities. We find then prophecies of then Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter, where then the restoration comes and then the cities are returning. That's why then most of the religions today, they are in uproar, because Yahweh has then, in quote, orchestrated the entire understanding, the entire events of the planet, so then when His cities would return, then the other nations would become aware of His mighty work. So then Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter becomes true. Even the Gentiles would then perceive His mighty works. And then the rebuilding of the cities, and then the city of Jerusalem later, and then the rebuilding of the temple. So then, this viewpoint brings us then to Solomon, or Solomon. During the time of his reign, started with then David, because he brought the kingdom together. But then the temple was built during the time of Solomon, and then the nations, they ceased from war. Came a time or a period of time where the world was in harmony. There was no war. The nations simply, they would come up to Jerusalem, and then they would receive wisdom from Yahweh through His people. During those years, quite honestly, Israel barely worked the land because there was so much. And they did work for some time because those were then orders from Yahweh. They should work the land, but it was done on a very minimum basis because there was so much coming in, and there was no requirement for them to work so much, because it was a time of harmony. And then the nations in the south, for instance Egypt and then Northern Africa, also experienced peace, because it was related with the harmony started by Yahweh Himself. Only He has then the proper harmony. So then when you trace back the understandings of Africa, where they came from, and then their aims, we begin to understand, and our quest starts then during the time of the harmony. Black pharaohs, during the time of Egypt and up north Israel. Why? Because harmony came from Jerusalem during the time. And precisely this time of harmony, because the time of rebuilding. When Yahweh speaks of rebuilding, He speaks of His harmony returning for a time. So then we establish then the understanding from Africa in terms of Sudan, Rwanda, Congo, the area over there a bit north, you find then the land of Cush. Then Yahweh in Yeshayahu speaks of the land of Cush. Yeshayahu 1:8. You find the land of Cush tabernacling in the hand of Yahweh comes lots of understandings, and one of them handed over to us was then the prophecy of Yeshayahu, related then with the land of Cush. Find the word tabernacling. However, when you study the word tabernacling, it's a very important word where then you have to have the camp and the tent and the tabernacle, because you are going then to be involved in servicing and then a deity in it. But then, if you understand in Hebraic thought, then there is no tabernacling outside of the holy city. There is, do you think? No, there isn't. The only explanation is the cities, where the Messiah said, go around the world and form holy cities, and then shepherd the Gentiles. And this was very popular from before 1009 until the time of Yohanan. Those were the times where then the cities were around, giving directives. And Asia truly prospered. So then, during this time of restoration, we already found the site where the first holy city of the time of the restorations are taking place. And we know where this city is going to be at, in the land of Cush. And you must find out precisely where then the site is going to be at, and it takes a caravan to go up there and find where Yahweh wants his city to be established. But we know the location. It's amongst Sudan, Rwanda, Congo, somewhere around the area over there. It's going to be the city. A city from many cities. That's why Yahweh has decided to build a city amongst the fears. You have to have a mandate from Yahweh, because if you get caught over there lying, you ended up snagged for crocodiles. That's why it's so fierce. Has to be Yahweh's work, or a person ends up in the river. So then you begin to understand the severity of the understanding of the holy city. Has to be from heaven. It's not a junky church in the corner. It's the holy city. And then comes the understanding of Yohanan, because he was during the first holy city of his time. And then from there, obviously, then the route is going to be reestablished from the city in Cush up to Jerusalem. Thus the Hebraic people going up and down. When you read Zechariah the prophet, the 8th chapter, then 10 Gentiles would get a hold of the garment of the Hebrew. Please come and teach us, because you know Yahweh is with you. While en route, because they're going up to observe the feast. Does it sound very much Shaliach Shaul? Establishing holy cities, but then making urgency to be at Jerusalem to observe the feast. Then more up north, kingdom of Nubia, closer to the desert. That's where the black pharaohs are going to be at. They're not going to name themselves pharaohs, but they're going to exercise the authority as per during the time of Shlimon, because we're speaking of a spiritual understanding of harmony. Then afterwards, more cities are going to come up, and more routes from the new city up to Jerusalem, and more movement of Hebraic people. Thus, more 10 Gentiles would grab a hold of the garment of the Hebrew. You would say, please teach us, because we know Yahweh is with you. So the restoration time is truly at hand, very near. A lot of work to be done. Please stay tuned.